is truly the tendency to find it fun that draws me to the activity. It's this and what people misunderstand per se about INTPs or NTs in some respects, as in we get pleasure from intellectual activity, and there are people who aren't NTs that get pleasure from intellectual activities. It's intellectualism, or the trait of intellection, that is the tendency to be attracted to ideas, concepts, problems, and argumentation. And really, I argue with people, and I'm interested in debate because I'm interested in concepts and ideas, and I know I don't know everything. I really am. In some ways, I'm selfish, as in I'm arguing with you to really see if you can give me something to think about. It's the same reason I like chess per se, and this as I present hard problems to people in chess when I'm playing chess, because I'm looking to see if they can come up with a solution. If they can come up with a solution and beat some very strong formation I've come up with in terms of the pieces, they've just given me some gold or something new to think about and consider, something to add to my own system of understanding, something to mull over, candy or food for thought essentially, and that's what I'm mining and I'm digging for in a lot of ways. Now what people seem to misunderstand is that when I'm doing this, I'm only looking for something. I'm actually looking for you to entertain me in some way, but I don't care to win necessarily. I don't care to embarrass you. I'm giving you something hard so that you can show me the way out. I'm using you in some respects, but it's not to get what you think, because I could give a fuck about the dominance hierarchy or the social ladder, but really it's just one big game to me. But that's why a lot of times, but what people don't understand in this is that if you try and give some objection that I can see is limited in its scope and is fallacious or missing in its parts, I will call that out and say, no, that doesn't work, try something else. And if you don't produce anything that's fruitful, I'll just leave the discussion, because there's no point in anymore, because you're proving to me you can't meet the ends and you're not worth the time. And really what's worth the time is an engaging debate insofar as you're giving me things to think about. A lot of times, and I don't know why people can't come to that understanding or that realization even in my own videos, as even in my own videos, I say I think this, I think that, and I present arguments. So it's really something, they're really things to consider. They're not things to necessarily accept and adopt. You can accept them and adopt them if you want, but you most likely have other things that you consider in order to believe and think. And so you're putting those things together and formulating things, and you'll be willing to challenge these things and consider them and treat them as open-ended phenomenon that you may adopt or you may reject. And if you adopt or reject, I would like people to leave comments, or if you even dislike the video or like the video, say why. I would love for people to do that. In fact, that's one of the major impetus for me doing these videos. Now, when people leave objections that aren't very good or affirmations that aren't very good, I will criticize them equally, very really, or I will say, yeah, you're right, or I'll say, I don't agree with you in this. And it's when people are persistent in erroneous reasoning that I get annoyed, but it's not when people don't agree with me, because I'm not agreeable in nature. It's like when people think that being disagreeable with me offends me. Nah, it doesn't. You don't have to agree with me. I don't care if you don't agree with me, because I'm not an agreeable person, and I'm skeptical in nature. Why would I be hateful and distant from disagreeable people? I'm disagreeable. That doesn't bother me. It's fallacies offend me. It's not just being purely disagreeable. If you can say I don't agree with this and this is why, and I think it's a good point, I'm like, hey, that's a good point. I do that all the time. And I say I don't agree with this, but I do agree with you here. I do that all the damn time. I'm not necessarily completely objective, but I try to be objective, because the point is just entertainment. I'm a hobbyist. It's something for me to enjoy. It's why a lot of times that if you get offended per se by somebody, and it's something that where you'll notice in inflated egos or sensitive people or whatever, people who do tend to get offended when somebody says that's stupid. You can say something I say you think is stupid, but you have to say why. Just saying that's stupid doesn't really... And then when you're like, behold the mystery of the universe, or read my mind, I'm like, the hell's the point of that? And I don't get that. I'll never say that's stupid. I'll say that's stupid and here's why. Because I would like a rebuttal. A lot of times it's like I don't want the thing to end per se in a debate. I would like to go on infinitum and not really end at some seeming conclusion a lot of times in a debate. Because I just don't think anybody has all the answers per se. I am trying to get to conclusions, but I don't think they're going to come in the immediacy of things, but really prolonged investigation of a multitude of opinions in terms of when I read other people's thoughts, or when I have other people give me their ideas, or when people debate with me, it helps me get to my own ideas, because there are things that they're going to rub against, or they're going to show empty spaces, or poorly put together conceptions. And a lot of times when I'm debating people, I don't even put out my best arguments because they're so strong. If they're strong, a lot of times people get intimidated and freeze up in the face of them and just turn to taunts and rants. So a lot of times in debates, I give up like the mediocre ideas, not the mediocre, but the marginally strength ones, or the ones that are really weak, and see if somebody can sniff out the weaknesses. And a lot of times I do know where the errors are in something, but I want to see if somebody else can see them. And a lot of times if people can't see the errors in something, I'm looking at to see, well, what is this person saying? What do they think, and what do they believe that makes them blind to these things? And why would they possibly be blind to these things? I'm doing a lot of thinking per se, as in I gotta get something out of this, or there's no point in terms of intellectual activity. And it's just like playing pickup basketball games. It's like you play pickup basketball games, you go hiking, you go kayaking. Well, I get into debates, I read philosophy, I read scientific papers, I do math, I have recreational mathematics and problem solving as a hobby. I have debate as a hobby. They're hobbies. It's something I do for fun because I have a trait of intellection. I have the trait of intellection, which is a tendency towards intellectualism in a summarized sense. And it's just that when people make these objections, I'm just like, the reason how I know you don't know, just that you're not necessarily, that you may partake in intellectualism, but you don't have the trait of intellection, because you don't understand where I'm coming from. You don't get it. You just don't get it. You very much don't get it. Or at least people who make these claims, they don't get it. They really don't. And it's like when somebody is being disagreeable with me or skeptical to what I'm saying, I don't get ticked off. I usually give a rebuttal. It's like I can be... things don't offend me. It's like typically I don't make moral judgments against people. I don't say... I can criticize an action. Very rarely people get petty in arguments, and that annoys me. But it's like some moral ascription to something. It's never one of intellectual variety. I'm not talking about... Let's leave the ethics out of it, and let's just talk about the ideas. I don't know why we as people have to get involved in some way. But it's... I like dialectic. But it's, also to say this, that, just because you have a degree doesn't make you an intellectual. It doesn't even mean that you have the trait of... You share the trait of intellection, which is a trait, very rarely. There is multiple reasons and motivations for why one goes to school. Careers and jobs are very really one of them. I mean, I have to get a job and I have to have a career, but that's not why I study mathematics, and that's not why I study physics. I mean, I like physics and I like mathematics, and I kind of have to have a job, so I am a physics major. But, I mean, like, it's not... I don't really want a job. I don't care about a job, necessarily. Nobody's telling me to study the things that I am studying, or to be an intellectual. nobody necessarily told me to do these things, and that's the other thing. There is a very strong intrinsic motivational piece to this, as in there's mastery associated with it. As I see myself get better at argumentation and debate, as I see myself better understand concepts and ideas, I'm going to be more drawn to the activity. Also, as there is a true sense of autonomy, as in there was no damn class that told me to pick up Kant. I've never taken a formal philosophy class. I've only taken a psychology 101 class. Nobody told me about Piaget. Piaget's not even discussed in most psychology class, because most people are constructivists. Boswinger is not discussed in most psychology classes. Skinner is not discussed in most psychology classes. Freud is discussed in a limited sense in most really postmodernist psychologists and constructivists are the ones that are discussed, and the individuals themselves aren't discussed. Mostly it's just the relevant theories and the tools of psychometrics really that are discussed. And those things aren't interesting to me, as in I had to look up the biography of Galileo and Newton and things, and those things weren't discussed in my, they're not discussed as individuals in my physics class. And physics is presented in a very sterile way, as in the connectivity of things aren't presented. So I have to go find those things in my own personal study, but I do them from my own, that from my own personal elation and enjoyment. And it's not, I wouldn't give a shit if the rest of the world knew or anything like that. And if these things die with me, they die with me. But that's it. I do it for myself. I don't care necessarily. I don't do it for you. I don't do it for that thought. I'm glad I can have things to share with the world, and I'm glad I can serve a community in a certain way and can integrate myself in a community on my terms in a sense of strengths and natural traits that I possess, but it will not ever be in its totality and be in a limited capacity. So it's me as the individual and my own individuation that leads me to these things. And it just means that if you get in a debate with me, well, good luck, because, I'm sorry, logic is the first way I approach things, so I may win a lot more, or it may seemingly win a lot of times, but it should just implore you or motivate you to look at debate and argument more, maybe take a philosophy class and look at and study half the things that you think you know something about. It's like there's so many ways you could go with it, per se, but very really that people make so many objections to intellectualism. And the only thing that makes a pseudo-intellectual is somebody who talks about things that they haven't investigated, or per se that anybody who won't admit when their knowledge is limited. I don't even find that people who, I don't think Christians are pseudo-intellectuals necessarily. That's something that people will say. I do find people that just shout out logical fallacies, like that's an ad hominem, or this is this and this and that, and never present an argument to maybe be pseudo-intellectuals. But I just don't think that that's like the greatest indictment and pejorative I think anybody can throw on somebody. And I don't ever call somebody a pseudo-intellectual, because I don't want to limit the activity of thinking. It's like, why insult somebody in their thinking? I'll say you're thinking, I don't agree with your thought here, I don't agree with this idea that you have here. I will say that in your insults you're petty or something like that, but I don't ever want to retract or detract or degrade the activity of rigor, inquiry, and thought. I only want to promote thought and get people to think about things more. I don't want people to think about things less, and I don't want people not to argue and debate about things. I try to make it pretty damn easy for somebody to share their ideas or argue with me, insofar as I will give you explicitly what I think. Only thing you have to do is look at that, say why you don't disagree, and present justifiable reasons for doing so, and we can get the thing off and running. It's just that most people suck at it, and they think that they get what the thing is because they've taken a few classes or they've gone to school, and that's not it. Because most people do not possess the trait of intellection, so they don't get it. They just don't. And I find it very analogous to other personality traits, or collection of factors of personality, such as ADHD or openness to experience or conscientiousness, that you have to realize when you're talking to somebody per se that is fundamentally it may be geared towards intellectualism. You may be talking to somebody who's fundamentally different than you, as in they're wired different than you, and it may not be all the funny little things you like to make out of it and start just this witch hunt or this propagandization of things or moral social something, as in why must you vilify something that I don't get it a lot of times. But that's my video on intellection, objection, handlers, and thank you Enid Patterson for the inspiration, and I wait for the dislikes to roll in said now.